What's up, everybody? Hope you're well. Putin last week demanded that foreign countries start paying for their oil in rubles, the Russian currency, and this has huge implications. So what does it mean for Russia and the EU and the United States, China, India, everything that's going on? This is KISS Finance. We're going to break it down, keep it simple, and let's get into it. Okay, so this is a CNBC article that came out last Friday, April 1st. And it's talking about how Russian President Vladimir Putin has sought to ratchet up the pressure on foreign buyers of natural gas, telling so-called unfriendly countries to pay in rubles from Friday or have their supplies cut off. Now, this is a huge issue for the European Union because they import so much oil from Russia. A huge percentage of their Russian imports are from Russia. And so this is a big asset in Putin's toolbox that he can use to fight back against sanctions. And what this does is it props up the Russian economy. It makes their currency stronger. You can actually see right here, this is a chart of the Russian ruble, the value of the Russian ruble. And normally, charts like this, the higher it goes means the better it gets. But what it's doing is it's comparing the Russian ruble to the US dollar. And so as this chart goes up, that's saying that the Russian ruble is getting devalued. And so as they invaded Ukraine, their currency started to inflate, losing value. But because of what Putin has been able to do, and because of India and China continuing to buy oil reserves, continuing to import oil from Russia, and Russia's been able to find ways to get around certain sanctions. This is kind of like a freak out in the markets. And as everybody has realized that there's ways for Russia to kind of fight back and get around certain things, it's kind of come back down, and now they're basically right where they were prior to their Russian invasion of Ukraine. So the Russian currency, the value of it tanked, and now it's right back to where it was. One of the reasons that Putin is demanding that the EU pay for their oil imports from Russia with rubles instead of euros or dollars is because when Russia invaded Ukraine, lots of countries froze Russia's assets around the world. And so they lost hundreds of billions of dollars. And so what Russia is trying to do is they're trying to take control of their money, put more of their assets in rubles in their own bank in their own countries, so that they're not at the whims of whether or not the US or the EU or any other country decides, oh, you do or don't have access to your money. They're saying, if you want our oil, you have to pay us through our banks with our money. And if they're able to pull this off, then if the US says, oh, you don't have access to your assets over here, Russia's like, well, we don't really have that many assets over there anyway, so it doesn't really matter. So this is a way for Russia to fight back against these sanctions. That's basically what these two paragraphs right here that I highlighted. The hundreds of billions in foreign assets, which include government securities and foreign deposits, could have been used to prop up the ruble and stave off inflation. But because they were frozen, Putin wasn't able to access them. And that's why you can see by this chart, that's one of the reasons that the ruble started to fall in value. This is a New York Times article talking about how the European Union gets 40% of its gas and a quarter of its oil from Russia. A cutoff from one day to the next, the Chancellor Olaf Scholz of Germany warned this past week would plunge our country and the whole of Europe into a recession. And so the EU, the world is talking tough, but Putin has a lot of tools in his arsenal that he can use to fight back. And, the EU is going to have to make a tough choice if they really want to go hard against Russia. They can, say, hey, we're not going to pay you in rubles, or we're going to sanction you and we don't care what you do, but they're going to take a massive hit to their economy. And right now, according to, I just want to make sure, this is just talking about how Germany and Austria prepare their citizens for what might come. They took the first official steps towards rationing their energy, with Berlin starting the early warning phase of planning for a natural gas emergency. The lesson for the West is that the effectiveness of financial sanctions can only go so far absent trade sanctions. So everyone's still trading with Russia. So even though there's a lot of financial sanctions, there's lots of ways to get around that using different banks. And so, the EU has record inflation right now. According to Politico, Eurozone inflation surged to an all-time high of 7.5% in March, further intensifying the European Central Bank's policy challenge as it seeks to fight spiraling prices without hurting growth. And energy is the lifeblood of any economy. It goes into everything. It goes into trucking, it goes into food production, it goes into, creating any product. And so if the EU decides to say, hey, Russia, we don't need your oil anymore, there's really not a whole, they could find other places to get it, but that's not going to be an overnight thing, So again, Putin has a lot of tools to fight back, and that's what he's doing to try and prop up his economy and fight back against the sanctions that are being imposed on Russia. This is one thing that we just need to keep an eye out on. The BBC reported that Moscow later appeared to soften its stance, saying on Wednesday ruble payments would be introduced gradually. So this is, you kind of have to read between the lines, but Putin also doesn't want to cut off. I mean, he's imported, the amount of money they make from exporting their oil to unfriendly countries around the world is massive. So if he cuts off all of that without anybody else to buy it, then the Russian economy is going to take a massive hit. So he has to try to tread this line where he's saying, hey, we want to strengthen our economy. But if he says, hey, we're going to do rubles, and the EU says no, that also hurts Russia as well. But there's another side of this coin. And India, according to CNBC, this article came out on Sunday, March 27th. India is snapping up cheap Russian oil, and China could be next. So while the EU is saying, hey, we don't care about your oil, or they're not saying we don't care about your oil, but they're trying to play hardball with Russia about paying in rubles. And if it happens where Russia says, hey, you have to pay in rubles, and the EU says no, India and China might just say, hey, we'll buy in rubles, we don't care. They're not super friendly with the US, so it doesn't really matter to them. And it's not like, America is going to invade Russia or India because of, we get so much of our products from Russia or China, and what could we really do? So this is a lifeline for Russia, where if everybody else in the world says, hey, we're not taking your oil, they have about 3 billion people combined in China and India saying, hey, we want your oil. And those governments don't want mass unrest because they don't have energy. So according to the CNBC article, there's been a significant uptick in Russian oil deliveries bound for India since March, after Russia's invasion of Ukraine began. China, already the largest single buyer of Russian oil, is also widely expected to buy more oil from Russia at deep discounts. So since everybody else in the world isn't buying Russian oil, or not as much, the US stated that they're not going to buy any Russian oil. The demand for Russian oil therefore goes down, therefore the price goes down. And so anyone who's still willing to buy from Russia gets it at a discount. And so China and India are saying, hey, if nobody else wants to buy oil, we'll buy it. We'll just, buy it a little bit cheaper. And Russia's like, all right, sounds good to us. So oh, this is saying the amount of the uptick. Cargoes of Russian crude to India were fairly infrequent, with 12 million barrels, delivered across all of 2021. But since March, 6 million barrels have been loaded and are bound for India. So in March, India imported half the amount that they imported in 2021 just in the month of March. So if that continues, they're going to import what, 6, 7, 8 times the amount of oil that they did, 6 times the amount of oil that they did the previous year. So this is something to keep an eye out. And the world knows that this is a big deal. And so the last article I want to show you is this last CNBC article that also came out last Friday, talking about how Russia and the West are battling to get China and India to take their sides in the Ukraine war. India and China haven't come out really either way for or against the Russian invasion of Ukraine. They've stayed pretty independent. They haven't come down hard. They haven't supported them. They basically said, Russia's doing what they're doing, and we're going to keep our relationships the same. But Russia's invasion of Ukraine has led to the biggest clash in decades. Both are competing to persuade some of the world's most powerful nations, namely China and India, to take a side in the conflict. Both Russia and the UK sent their foreign ministers to India on Thursday, making for a somewhat awkward diplomatic clash, with both looking to woo Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government on trade and the Ukraine war. India's position has raised many eyebrows around the world. Ankit Panda of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace told CNBC Thursday for its abstentions at the United Nations its unwillingness to criticize Russia. Indeed, in recent weeks, India has been snapping up Russia's oil that's being sold at a discount as Western buyers look to heavily reduce their energy imports from Russia. And, you know, in regards to the China front, this is talking about Xi and Putin. While Beijing, Putin reportedly promised Xi not to launch any kind of invasion of Ukraine. So the reports are that the Russian President Vladimir Putin and the Chinese President Xi are pretty close, and Putin told Xi, hey, we're not going to invade Ukraine while the Beijing Winter Olympics were taking place. And the two leaders on February 4th signed a 5,300-word statement in which they stated that the new interstate relations between Russia and China are superior to political and military alliances of the Cold War era, and that the friendship between the two states has no limits. So does it sound like Russia and India, both of whom have massive populations, are going to sit back and say, you know what, we don't want your oil, when there seems to be a lot of friendliness between them? It doesn't really look that way. So again, Russia has a lot of tools in their toolbox that they can use to fight back against these sanctions, against the lower demand for oil. You know, if one country isn't going to buy it, another one will. And with the price of oil skyrocketing, you know, not as bad as it was, it's come down recently, but a couple months ago, it was sitting at like $70 a barrel. Now it's $105 a barrel today. So there's a lot of countries that are saying, you know, if the US, the EU doesn't want to buy your oil, you know, China and India will, and their economies are massive. So they need a lot of energy. They produce a lot of stuff that requires a lot of energy. It requires a lot of oil. So this is something to keep an eye on, and I'll do that for you. Let me know if you have any questions. Like, subscribe. Let me know if you would like me to talk about anything more specifically. I just want to do a general breakdown. So until next time, keep it super simple. I'll try and do the same, and I'll see you next time. See ya. Bye.